If you want a dialogue system like in Grow a Garden, then this video is for you. I've made this free and simple to use resource, and in this video I'll show you how to make a cell system with it. In the description you'll find a link to the resource. You'll also find a link to the DevForum post, which you can check out after this video to learn more. To get started, click on the first link in the description, click on Get Model. Now open Roblox Studio and insert it into the game from the toolbox. We can delete the thumbnail camera object. In the folder, we have the dialog module itself, and a folder containing a ready-to-use example. First, I'll show you how to set up the example, and then after that, we'll be making the example from scratch. Drag everything into their respective containers. Here we have the tools we can sell. This is the backend for the cell system. And these are the two examples we have. One is for the cell system, and the other is an example of a linear dialogue, so something you might find in an RPG game or a story game. In each NPC is a script that handles the dialogue for that NPC. This has two things. The first is the remote the client will use to communicate with the backend. We're using remote functions because we want to wait for the server to process any requests to sell a tool before we move on to the next part of the dialogue. In the modules folder, we have the dialog module and two modules dedicated to the cell system. Util is a utility module that both the backend and client will make use of. Client is the code we'll link to the dialog module. Let's play to see the system in action. There's some text in the middle of nowhere. That's because of the module script still in the folder. Let's delete it for now so it doesn't get in the way. If we talk to the linear dialogue NPC, it's just continuous text. We can leave the dialogue early by walking away from the NPC. Now let's talk to the cell NPC. This time we're presented with some options. We can select never mind to end the dialogue. We can try to sell without a tool equipped. Now equip a tool and sell. We get the cash and the tool is removed. After we sell, the NPC notices we have more tools, so it asks if we want to sell anything else. Select yes and we'll loop back to the start of the conversation. We can also see how much our tools are worth. And then we can sell everything, which doesn't need us to equip a tool. Now I'll show you how to make the example from scratch. Before we start, here's a visual representation of each NPC's dialogue. For the cell NPC, notice that we have an option that can loop the conversation. Let's delete all the objects from the example. Put the dialog module in the replicated storage. Create a folder called modules. Add another folder called dialog to store the module. Let's also delete this leftover folder in the workspace. Now let's get some tools from the toolbox. I'm going to delete everything except the handle because I'm just interested in having a tool that I can sell. Each tool we want to sell will have an attribute called price. It's going to be a number. I'll set it to 15. Let's make some more copies with different prices. If we just play now, it'll be hard to tell which tool has which price. Let's rename each tool to display the price. This one should say 20. And then remove the texture ID from each tool so we can see the tool's name in the hotbar. And now if we play, we know which tool has which price. Next, let's make the backend. It'll have two components. The first will handle sell requests from the players. The second will handle the players. In the main script, we'll require the modules and call a start function that we'll implement soon. Comment out sell because we're going to do the players module first. Get the players service. Then define the table for this module. Inside, we need a start function. For now, let's just print a message. Play the game, and we can see the message in the output. In this module, we just need to make the cache value for each player. First, listen to player added. Then let's make their leader stats folder and cache value. That's everything for the players module. Let's play again. The cache shows up in the player list. Before implementing the sell module, we need to make the remotes for sell requests. Let's make a folder to store the remotes. Make sure we use remote functions so the client can know when the server has finished processing the sell request. We have two remotes, one to sell a single tool and one to sell every tool the player has. In the sell module, first get the remotes. In start, let's bind a function to each remote. Sell all will receive only the player. Sell this will receive the player and the tool they want to sell. Because we're receiving data from clients, we need to validate it. We can put this validation logic in a utility module. We want this module available to the server and the client, since the client will also make use of this to make dynamic dialogue. For example, when the user tries to sell a tool, we should have different outcomes for if the player has a tool equipped or if they don't have one equipped. Make a folder. Inside, make a module called util. First, we need a function to check if an object is a valid tool, which also means we can sell it. First, check that the object is a tool. Then make sure it has an attribute named price. At the end, return true. Let's also add false to these returns to be a bit more clear. Next, we want a function to get the currently held tool. This will be used by the client to specify which tool they want to sell. First, check if the character exists. Then check if there's a tool parented to the character. Finally, make sure the tool is valid. And then return the tool. Now make a function to get every tool a player has. First, look for tools in the player's backpack. Again, make sure each tool is valid before adding it to the list. Then check if the player has an equipped tool. Return the list. Make a function to get the value of a tool. And we'll return the price attribute. Then make a function to get the value of a list of tools. Inside, we'll just iterate over each tool and add its value. The lost function will make sure a tool belongs to a player. We'll use this to make sure cheaters aren't able to sell another player's tool and earn cash from it. Now in the sell module, let's get the util module. Let's also make a function called sell that will sell a player's tool. First, let's add to the player's cache. Then remove the tool. For the sell all remote, get a list of the player's tools. Then iterate over it and call sell on each tool. For the sell this remote, first make sure a tool is given. Then make sure the tool belongs to the player and it's valid. Finally, call sell on it. Let's play the game. We can use the command bar to send our sell requests. Let's try to sell a single tool. We get the cache and the tool is removed. Now let's sell all the tools. In the sell folder, let's make another module script. This one will be the client module that the dialog script will interact with. First, get the remotes and the util module. We also need the player object to pass to the util functions. Let's define some functions to send sell requests for us. Now let's define the module table. The first function will be to sell every tool. Get the list of tools. Make sure it's not empty. If it's empty, return nil. If not, let's first get the total value. And then return it. Before that, let's call sell_all. The functions in this module script will return nil when the request isn't successful. In this function, the request won't be successful if the player doesn't have any tools. Make a function for selling a single tool. Get the player's equipped tool. If there is a tool, get its value. Sell it, then return the value. And if there isn't a tool, let's return nil. We don't need to write out the return nil, but it's a bit clearer if we do. This is the looping part of our sell system. We'll need to return some more information to tell the dialog script whether we can loop or not. Let's check if the player has any more tools to sell. If they do, we want to loop, otherwise we'll end the dialog here. Then let's return this along with value. We're returning two things here, while the other functions will only return one, so make sure to remember this when we implement the dialog script. Now make a function to check the value of every tool. Get the list of tools. Again, make sure the list isn't empty. Return the total value. If it's empty, return nil. And now we need a function for the value of a single tool. We'll pretty much do the same here. And that's everything we need for the sell system. Now let's make the NPC. In the avatar tab, click on character. Select whatever type you want. Let's remove the name text above the NPC's head. To do this, set the humanoid's display distance type to none. I'm also going to delete the animate script. Let's give it infinite health so players can't kill the NPC. And I'll anchor the humanoid root part so players can't push the NPC around. For the dialog script, we have two options. We can make a local script inside starter player scripts. Don't put it in the starter character scripts, starter pack, or starter GUI, or the script will run each time the character spawns, so we'll end up with multiple proximity prompts inside each NPC after we respawn a couple times. The other option is to create a regular script, which we can put anywhere. Let's put it under the NPC, then set its run context to client because the dialog module only works on the client side. First, let's get the dialog module and the sell client module. Then we need the NPC. To create a dialog, we call the new function. We have to give it some object. This could be a model or a part, so you can use it on non-character objects too. Whatever we put here will be the parent for the overhead dialog GUI. It'll also be the center of the dialog, so we'll draw a radius around it, and if the player walks out of this radius, the dialog will end. If you have model streaming enabled, which will be enabled by default in a new place, we'll have to set the mode to atomic. This means that the entire model will either not be loaded at all or fully loaded in at the same time. This will prevent cases where the script loads in before the humanoid root part. This function returns the dialog object, so let's store it in a variable. To create a proximity prompt, call createPrompt on the object. When we're calling any function on the dialog object, make sure you use a colon rather than a dot. You can see the parameters we need to give. They're the properties we'll give to the proximity prompt. The last parameter is the proximity prompt's parent. If we don't give an argument for this, it'll default to the object we gave at the start. So in this case, it'll be the humanoid root part. Let's play the game. Now we have a proximity prompt inside the NPC. If we trigger it now, we'll get an error because we haven't added any dialogue. If you already have your own proximity prompt in the NPC, we can create a dialog using that prompt. To do this, instead use the withPrompt function and include the proximity prompt you want to use. Now if we play and try to trigger the prompt, we should see the same error message. I'm going to stick with createPrompt. We can also add a highlight by calling createHighlight. Again, we can give a parent, which will also default to the humanoid root part. This time we'll want to give a parent because we don't want the highlight to be around the humanoid root part, but around the entire NPC. If you want to create a highlight, you first need to create the proximity prompt, but creating a highlight is optional. Let's play. When we get in range, the highlight appears, and when we go outside, the highlight disappears. You can change how the highlight looks by modifying the template. There's also a bunch of other templates you can customize here. Again, the highlight is optional. If you don't want it, just don't call createHighlight. Now let's add an entry point to the dialog. We have two functions we can use, add dialog node and add option node. These are two different types of dialog. For the cell system, we want to start with an option node. We have to give the text we want the NPC to say. Now let's run the game. The NPC will say the text and the dialog ends because we haven't added any options. To add an option, we first need the node, so let's store it in a variable. Then we can call add option on it, give the text for the option, run the game again. Now we can select the option. We haven't told the script what to do when the option is selected, so it just ends the dialog. We can add a second argument to decide what to do when the option is selected. Here we can see it accepts either a function that returns a node or the node itself. For a static dialog, meaning we'll always get the same outcome when we select the same option, we can just give the next node we want. If I give it the head node, we should get a loop. We can only exit this dialog by walking outside or resetting our character. If we want dynamic dialog, meaning the outcome might change based on some conditions, we should instead give a function. This function should return a node to go to next. If we don't return anything in this function, the dialog will end here. And if we don't give either a function or a node, the dialog will end when we select this option. Let's just generate a random number in the message. We can also add the next node later on in the script. To do this, first store the option in a variable, then call add option next on the head node. First give the option variable, which is simply a number identifying the option. Then we can give a node or a function. Now let's add the other options. For this option, we want to end the dialog without the NPC giving a response, so we don't need to do anything for the second argument. Now we have many options to choose from. First, let's implement the sell everything option. Call the sell client sell all function. Recall that it returns the total value only if the player has any tools. So if there's a result, we can return a node containing the value. Let's test to check if this works. And now we can sell all our tools. If we try to sell everything again, we just end the dialog. We want the NPC to show some relevant message before ending the dialog. To do this, we can return a different node if result is nil. We'll be using this node for other options too, so let's define it above to reduce repetition. Now when we try to sell without any tools, we get a different message. Let's implement the sell this option. First we'll need a node for when the player has no tool equipped. Then we can call sell this. Recall that this one returns two values. We'll do a similar thing as above. Let's run the game. Now we can sell individual tools, but we also want to loop the dialog if we have more tools to sell. Let's define a loop node. And let's give it a yes option. If we select it, let's just return the head node, so we loop to the start of the dialog. Then add a no option, which will just end the dialog. Now we need to give the next node for this before returning it. Dialog nodes have a setNext function. In it, we can either give a node or a function, just like we did for the option node. Here we just need to give the loop node. And we only want to set next if the second value returned is true, meaning the player has more tools to sell. Now test the game. Each time we sell, we're given the choice to loop back to the start. Once we sell the lost tool, we won't be asked to loop because we have no tools left. For the how much is this option, we'll simply get the value and return a node containing it. And do a similar thing for the how much is everything option. Let's do one final test to make sure it all works. And that's everything for the cell system. Before we move on to the linear dialogue NPC, if the video has helped you so far, be sure to subscribe and like the video. Now I'll show you how to make the linear dialogue NPC, which will be very quick. Let's copy the NPC. Remove everything we don't need. I'm also going to change some of the proximity prompt's properties. And now let's make the starting node. We want a dialog node. Then we want to add another dialog node after that. We could create a function in which we return the next node. But this won't work as well when we introduce a third node. We'd have to make the second node outside and set its next node, then put the reference to the second node inside this function. If we just have static dialog, we can get rid of the function and simply pass the node. And when we pass a node to set next, or for option nodes to set option next, we get this next node returned. Note that we won't get anything returned if we pass a function rather than a node. This means we can chain together these set next functions like so. Now let's run the game. The dialog plays one after the other. We can also switch between the NPCs without any issues. That's everything you need to know to get you started, but I'd also recommend you read my DevForum post to learn about the rest of the functionality available. If you want to support the channel, check out my Patreon. The model in this video is free to get on Roblox, but you'll also get access to models from the rest of my videos. And if Patreon isn't your thing, subscribing and liking the video also helps. Thanks for watching and have a wonderful day.